You're listening to Lemon's Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality.
Because, horses, like, they test you, and if they can get away with shit. Oh, can I say shit on this podcast?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Okay, good.
My favorite word is fuck, so you are totally
good.
good.
So I can say fuck. Okay.
Yeah.
So, my friends were saying you're too inexperienced for this horse because he's out of control. He's been whatever. You're going to get hurt. He's going to keep testing you, and you're kind of afraid to correct him. So then he's going to get anyway. Long story short, I kept him anyway for a long time. I was afraid of him because he was really. You probably wouldn't have been. You sound like you're much more experienced than me, but I was afraid. But I didn't have the heart to get rid of him because I could see him ending up like glue or something. You know what I mean? So now he's the best behaved horse, but in the day I just kept working with him when we built up trust. And the day I realized I'm not afraid of him anymore, because he used to seem so big to me because I'm more used to minis. That's what I've had the majority of my life. So anyway, the day I realized I'm not afraid of him, I was walking him outside in the morning, and all of a sudden I thought, he doesn't look so big to me anymore. And that's when it hit me, because I'm not afraid of him anymore. You know what I mean? But it took a lot of work. I wouldn't, anybody that's not experienced with horses, I don't let them go near him, because right away his behavior will change, because he senses it, and then he gets all pushy. He was gelded really late in life, so he's got a lot of steady behavior still that will never go away.
But I love what you just said there, like he got smaller, because like that is almost, you can almost compare that to fear in general, like the boogeyman under the bed, and then you realize it's not there, and it's just the darkness. Like it gets so much smaller whenever you control your fear around it.
Yeah, like, it was crazy. He seemed like the Eiffel Tower to me or something, the Empire State Building when I first, and I'd been around some full-size horses before, but never one that acted like him. But most of my experience was with minis, and I mean, honestly, they're a piece of cake. Who cares if they go crazy on you? I mean, they can still hurt you if they kick you in the wrong spot or something, but they're not really any major threat. But yeah, I was scared of him, and then all of a sudden I realized, hey, I'm not.
Welcome to Lemon's Listening Library. I am Randie Lemons, fantasy author, or RL Rose to those of you in the romance community. I am joined today by my amazing co-host, Finley Ray. Finley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Internet. I'm Finley Ray. I also go by Finn. I am Randie's Lemons Listening Library's resident shit poster, as well as the writer of Gay Spooky Shit.
I love that. I love hearing the intros. That's one of my favorite things. All right, before we introduce our amazing guest today, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. If you guys are interested in our services on Patreon, we do advertising for your books or your services on the show or within our groups. So if you guys are interested in that, head over to Patreon, check it out. It's a great way to get your services out there and to support the show, because, we're just cool like that. All right, guys, I would love to welcome our brilliant guest today, Raven Croft. Raven, would you please introduce yourselves to our amazing listeners?
I never know what to say whenever I introduce myself, because I'm like 50 people all rolled into one. Right now, I'm sort of semi-retired with other stuff. I'm an author, but I'm a former investigative journalist, a feature writer. I have been a dog trainer for many, many years. I had a successful dog training academy. I've worked with wildlife as a caretaker and a wildlife educator. Let's see what else. I've pretty well done everything under the planet. I've been involved in animal rescue in various capacities. And I guess that's pretty well the main stuff I fit right there.
I love that. So when did you first start writing? Like, was that something that you did as a child and then it just kind of turned into authorship, or was that something that kind of came later in life?
Well, I started writing, I was about 7 years old. And I still remember I wrote a book series, which now when I look back on it, each book was about a page to 3 pages long, written in pencil. You know what I mean? Because I was little, I was about 7. And every book I put into a file folder and I put it on my bookshelf. I still remember a pink bookshelf in my bedroom. And I kept telling my friends, I wrote a book series. So, you know, it was about a talking cat named Penelope. And she had all these adventures with her animal friends who also talked. And, you know, they did a lot of fun shit. So that's sort of when I first got into writing. And I don't even remember why or how. But I mean, I read a lot of books when I was a little kid. One of my big interests in life, as you can probably guess, is animals, right? So I read a lot of animal books and animal stories. So that's generally is sort of what I drifted to. But you know, as time went on, I did other stuff. I got into dog training, and that was a lot of fun. And eventually, I went back to school, got my degree in journalism. So I became a feature writer, investigative journalist, and I mean, it was great. I mean, you know, as long as I enjoyed the work that I was doing, I did when I freelanced, but when I had jobs, you're assigned work, and sometimes you're just not into the assignment, but too bad, you need the paycheck. So you know what I mean. But eventually I thought, you know what, I want to do something more fun. So one day I just decided I'm going to write fiction, and what the hell, see if I'm any good at it, right? And I figure, you know, everybody gets better as they go along anyway. So I just figured, you know, if it's not any good at first, who cares? It'll be okay in the end. Might, you know. So I wasn't really too worried about it. Um, so yeah, that's sort
When
of how I got to be an author.
when you were little and you first started writing, do you feel like that was a way that you like did you hang out with a lot of friends? Did you have a lot of friends, or was that maybe your way to kind of create a world that you wanted to live in? Or like what have you considered what drew you to writing when you were so young?
Well, I had a lot of friends, but yeah, I don't really know what made me. I think because of the books I read, I enjoyed the books. And actually, I still remember one really clearly. It's probably out of print for a long, long time. It was called Haunt Fox, Haunt, Haunt Fox. It was about, you know, a story about a wild fox and, you know, that sort of thing, by a really well-known author at that time, but I can't remember their name. But, you know, I enjoyed all these books that I borrowed from the little library at school, so I just thought I'd try to write my own. So I think my love of writing bloomed from my love of reading.
I feel like that's fair, and I feel like that's a lot of authors. Like we tend to write, and Finn, you can kind of back me up on this. We write what we want to read.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yep, yep.
That's a huge thing. Also, if I'm on mute when I'm not talking, it's because my first son has decided to raise the alarm about the kids playing.
You're
Oh yeah.
fine.
But yeah,
Somebody's
it's
breaking in,
definitely
Dad.
yeah. So it's a lot of I think we all just kind of have this sense of just like there's other stories we want to see told and curious about how they would play out if they were given a chance.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were a journalist in an investigation. Now how did was that something that you're like, oh, I can kind of express my writing this way, or was it just like this is a job, but also you find out that it kind of pushed your creativity a little bit?
I mean, you get to be creative a little bit, but I think I went into journalism simply because um you know, I thought it's hard to just be an author. I think I always knew I loved to write fiction, but I thought you can't just get a job writing fiction. So, you know, I had bills to pay and stuff. So I figured the closest thing was getting a degree in journalism because at least I'm writing and for sure you can get jobs there. But I remember in school when I was in university, I used to get shit all the time because I'd be too, you know, journalism, it's very factual, it's whatever. Like you can put a little bit of descriptive stuff in there, but you know, I mean, it's very easy to, you know, slant a story into the viewpoint you want just by the, you know, the quotes you pick and things like that. So, but I used to get shit from all my professors that the best part of my work was my introduction because it was almost like the introduction to a fiction book, and then I'd get on with the story, because I think it was always just in me to write that way. And they'd say, no, you really can't have all this. You got to get straight to, the facts. And I'm thinking, oh, but that's so boring, right? So I really struggled with that, although I did good as a journalist. But I wasn't writing the way that I really wanted to write.
And that kind of shifted you into where you started writing more fiction and stuff like that because you didn't have that outlet and didn't fulfill your creativity.
Yeah, pretty well. I mean, all through high school, I wrote short stories, which actually were pretty long, short stories, but just for fun. But I didn't publish them anywhere. I didn't think about it. I just wrote them because I enjoyed them. But I remember sometimes thinking, is this ever good? I wish I had somewhere to publish this, right? And it just never occurred to me that I could be sending them out or publishing them self-pub or something, you know what I mean? But yeah, but basically I gave up the journalism and all the other work that I was doing because I just thought, I just want to write.
Now, were you able to become full-time author?
Yeah, I'm pretty well a full-time author now, but I do other stuff on this side. Do you know what I mean? I still train dogs a little bit, although I'm pretty well out of it. Right now I'm training my own rescued dog that needs a lot of work. She'd been sitting in a shelter for 6 months and just nobody would take a chance on her. She's like a cross between two pretty aggressive guarding breeds and had no training before. Anyway, long story. I knew if somebody didn't take her, she'd be killed. And I went and saw her because I just kept looking at her picture online, and the guy said, oh, I've shown her like 40 times and no one will take a chance on her. So now I've got her and she's been here about 2 months. But I mean, I absolutely love her and she's really coming along. So, but unfortunately, I don't get paid for training her because she isn't going to give me any money anytime soon. She's just glad to be home, right? But mainly I'm a full-time author now. I do some little stuff on the side, just that I enjoy sometimes. But yeah,
that's awesome. You are goals.
And what do you write, Raven?
Well, right now, I used to write mainly dark romance under a different pen name. And now I write basically paranormal fantasy, like shifter stuff. Mainly.
What drew you to the shifter world? Kind of shifting out of the dark romance. What drew you into the
two
shifter?
Different genres. Yeah, it's why I'm not showing my face because I can't decide which of the genres I want my face associated. You know what I mean? So, dark romance is great. I mean, I love it. And I mean, but it's just, for me, it seems to be more fun to write the shifter stuff. Because I just feel that you can be way more creative, or at least I can. You know what I mean? Because I can create new worlds and just new creatures and new rules, new universes, like everything that you really can't do in other genres, right?
So you want to kind of lean heavy a little bit more into like the fantasy side of things.
Yeah, but not, well, it depends. Like it depends on the book and stuff. But well, really I've just started off in the paranormal fantasy. I've just got the first 2 books of my first series out right now. So, and that's very weird because I had forgotten what it's like because of course it's a new pen name, so everybody that's browsing on Amazon, they don't see this big backlist, no catalog, nothing, so they figure it's just some new person. So I have no followers, so it's not like when the first book came out all of a sudden I'm already high in the rankings and a million reviews from this mega art like none of that's there. And it reminded me, oh my god, now I remember what it's like starting out, because it's starting out all over again.
That is
Right?
so interesting. I guess I never really considered that, if you go into a new pen name and you begin a new genre, whenever your identity is in one and you kind of break away from that it is so much like starting over.
It's like totally starting over because you're a new person to everybody on Amazon, right? They don't know because there's not a crossover between the 2 genres. So it's not like I can put it on my profile page, also writes as, Raven Croft, because people that read my other stuff won't like this paranormal shifter stuff because it's just totally different, right? So it is being like brand new in the fiction world, right? And I mean, it's exciting, but it's also like, oh my God, I'm not making great money now because people think I'm new. Right.
Yeah.
And I find that people judge you more harshly because they think you're new. They might think it's the first thing you've ever written in your life. Do you know what I mean? When it's not. And I'm sure it's like that for a lot of authors, right? But so it's really hard to build that following. And I was advertising the first book for a while, and I found I was either breaking even or I was losing money because I only had one book out under the name of Raven Croft, right? So it's not like people that read it and loved it. Well, there's nothing else to buy. I didn't even have the rest of the series out. There's no backlist, there's no nothing. So then I remembered, oh, yeah, this is what it was like. Right. So,
So
yeah.
what are you doing are you kind of going back to like what you did in the beginning where you started to build yourself up? Is there like a system that you're like, oh yeah, this is how I did it before, and now you're just kind of falling back into that system? Or is it because things are so different from whenever you first published that you're kind of like, it's a new ball game?
Um, well, the first time, all I did was just keep releasing and releasing and releasing, and the books about a month or so apart, whatever. And eventually, when there's enough of them out, all you need is one of them to sort of get popular. Then all of a sudden, everything starts to sell. So I don't have this magic formula or anything. I wish I did, right? But so I'm not really doing it a different way. I'm just gonna keep putting the books out, and eventually it'll take hold again. But sometimes, I mean, I've talked to other authors. Sometimes you're lucky with the first book or the first series that hits big, but it's really hit and miss when you're brand new. So you just keep releasing your series, and eventually you get there,
Yeah.
right?
Now,
It just takes a while.
whenever you were writing before, did you have all these stories kind of figured out ahead of time and then you just released them, or like have them completely ready to be released, but then released them like strategically back to back? Or are you just capable of writing that quickly?
Sometimes I can write that quickly, but to be honest, most of the time I can't. But what I did, before in the other genre, I sort of made the mistake. I'd write a book thinking, oh, yeah, it's a masterpiece, when you first start. And then I'd release it, and then people would buy it, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh my God, everyone, because some of the reviews would say, you can hardly wait for book 2. And I'd be thinking, I'm only on the first chapter of book 2. Oh my God. So, now I've learned my lesson, because you lose a lot of the readers, because by the time you publish, unless you write super, super fast, which I don't, you lose a lot of that flow and the momentum and the readership. So now the way I think I'm going to do it is write up a whole series, whether it's a trilogy or longer. And then once it's all done, the covers are done, the blurbs are done, like everything's done, then I'm going to start to release it about a month apart. But that way I stay on schedule. So it'll be a while, I think, sometimes between my series being published, but I think it'll work better that way. I know a lot of authors can write that fast, so they confidently start to just release and figure, yeah, I'll finish book 2 on time and book 5 on time or whatever. But I just can't guarantee it. I mean, I write every day, but I just find I can't write as fast. I can when it's weird. If I'm writing nonfiction, I write like 40 times as fast, right? It's just fiction seems to take me longer. It's probably just me, right? It's just the way I am.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it varies person or author to author, because there are some authors who they bust out, like 6K to 20K a day. And I'm like, I think I got 15. I think I got like,
Yeah, I know.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So it's definitely a process for each person, and it looks different. You know, some people are working full-time jobs, but then also some people are, the way that they write is different. Some people plan everything out, and then it's just very easy to get through the book writing it. And some people are pansters and just kind of go with the flow, and some people are
Yeah,
somewhere
it's
in
what I
between.
am. So I go with the flow. So I think that's part of the reason it takes me longer. I used to ghostwrite before, and edit books for people and things, right? And when you ghostwrite, I would love it when people would give me a plan because they say, here's kind of what I want to happen. Sometimes it would be chapter by chapter, but as long as I had an outline, it's a piece of cake because you know exactly where you're going. Um, I can't write that way personally because it kills my creativity because I don't know the characters in the world well enough. And sure, I mean, I can do it, but the book won't be half as good. I have to actually start writing it, get into the world, get to know and feel the characters. And then it's almost like the characters write themselves and they're telling me their story. I just have to write it down. But I can't plan a book that way because I don't know the characters well enough. I'm not as deep into the world yet.
Yeah, no,
So
and that's
it
something
doesn't
I
work for me.
experienced too, is the characters just they lead it if you let them. If not, you kind of train rail them.
Yeah, yeah, pretty well.
You're like, you're going here whether you like it or not. So you had a 1-star review whenever you were how did you overcome that challenge, and what kind of advice can you give to authors who do get those 1-star reviews?
Oh, yeah, my first one-star review. I still remember. I think everybody remembers their very first one-star review, right? It was a dark romance, obviously, because that's what I was doing at the time. And I think, from what I remember, I think it's the first review I ever got, which even makes it worse. It's not like I had a whole bunch of 3s, 4s, 5s, and then somebody threw in a wow. No, it was a very first review. So, meanwhile, I was so afraid to begin with, you know, waiting for the first reviews, and then I see it there, a 1. And I forget what the person said, but it was horrendous, right? I remember reading it thinking, "Oh my God, no," you know. And I can't remember how I handled you just sort of I thought back, I remember thinking back, okay, well, think about when you were a journalist, whatever, you'd get a lot of backlash because I wrote a lot of controversial investigative shit, right? So there's always somebody that's angry about something. Not everybody likes your work. And I just thought, just treat it like you did then. It's a business. Not everyone's going to like your stuff. This person didn't like it. Hopefully others like it, right? And you just have to basically ignore it, right? I mean, because there's really nothing else you can do, right? You can't let it get to you because no matter what, I mean, even the most successful authors in the world, some people don't like the way that they write, right? It's just, you can't please everybody. But yeah, the first review I ever got on anything, I mean, on Amazon was like a 1-star. And I still remember it was like a nightmare. I just thought, oh, because my first thought was, oh my God, have I made a mistake going into fiction and all this, you know, these thoughts run through your head. But then I just remembered, hey, when you were, you know, writing nonfiction, you know, you were a journalist, a lot of people got mad at the stuff you wrote then too. Who cares? Right? And I just learned to ignore it and kept writing.
So you didn't allow it to like take it, okay, now I'm going to go back and read it or look at what they said. You just kind of moved on from it. And that makes sense, you know, having experience with that before.
Well, you have to, you know what I mean? Because what else can you do? Right? I mean, some people would take it to heart and, you know, because think about it, if now if you're getting a whole bunch of reviews on, I mean, any book, whatever, and a lot of people are saying, let's say the same kind of stuff, then you should pay attention. Hey, they're all saying this. I wonder if I'm missing something there. Or if they're all saying the same good stuff, that then you think, okay, I'm doing that great because they're all liking this. Or but I mean, you know, if you get a multitude of reviewers all saying the same thing, you have to at least take a look, right, and see what's going on. But just the odd one, you just ignore it, right? Because I mean, imagine if you tried to change your writing style over every review you read, right? And a lot of times, I mean, in the dark romance stuff, I don't really, because sometimes I didn't even read all the reviews. You just get to the point. You don't read them all. You just sort of pay attention of, roughly what's going on. But I mean, if an author tried to change their work every time they read somebody's review, they wouldn't even be writing like themselves anymore. They'd be trying to be somebody they're not. It would ruin their whole style, their creativity. I mean, everything would be gone, right?
Yeah.
And plus, you can't please everybody because sometimes the reviewers are saying opposite things. So how the hell would you please everyone at the same time? Like, you just can't.
That is such a good message for all of our people who are interested in being an author or are authors and they are getting their first negative reviews. That is huge, Raven. And I am so thankful that you have brought that up because, we have a lot of people who are like, definitely take it to heart and consider it. And then we have the other side who are like, just ignore it. But I think that yours is like, yeah, it's not going to help. You can't change anything on how you write. If you do, it's going to change your voice and it's going to change how you tell your story. And then it's no longer authentic to your style.
Right, exactly.
I think that's an important message.
So what flavor in the dark romance genre do you write, Raven?
What? I didn't hear the first part, sorry.
So like what kind of, within dark romance, what kind of subgenre, or like what sort of scenarios do you explore?
All different stuff. I wrote for a while. I went through a phase where I wrote a lot about rock stars just because it was fun. So there were rock stars in sort of every story. A lot of times I write, well, it depends, but I got into a time period where I wrote like such super dark stuff where there was a lot of bondage, S&M, and violence and everything. But my books were so dark that even the people that, were reviewing and saying, I usually love the darkest of the dark, but this is so dark, I could barely get through it. I had to take breaks and, you know what I mean? So I think I went too far, sort of just, and then, what? Sorry?
Well, do you think some of your experience doing investigative journalism might have influenced that? Just like seeing how far you could take a story?
Oh, I never really thought about that. But you know what? You have a good point. It might have been it because I used to love controversial stuff. Actually, I got myself in big trouble. I think I was in first year of journalism and I was doing an investigative story on vivisection, like experimentation on animals, just in case somebody out there has to Google what that is. I'll save you the trouble. And there, I think a year or two prior to that, an animal rights group had broken into 2 universities and removed some lab animals to save their lives, like monkeys and I think bunnies. And I mean, I forget what exactly, but monkeys and cats, I think for sure. And anyway, so I was doing a story on vivisection and I pre-sold it to a magazine before it was written. I pitched the idea, whatever, a query, right? And the editor liked it. And so I ended up tracking down some of the people that had broken into these universities, and they agreed to talk to me on the condition that they remained anonymous. So, and shortly after I did the interviews, a few of them got arrested, but not for that. They were never connected to the break-ins at the schools. They got arrested for writing something like "meat is murder" on the side of restaurant, like graffiti, right? Because they were really, really against eating meat. So anyway, I ended up with the RCMP, which is, I think, the Canadian version of the FBI or something, but they're pretty scary guys.
No.
They're pretty scary at my door. And they said, how do you know these people? And meanwhile, I'm just this first or second year. I can't remember what year I was in. I think it was first, journalism student. And meanwhile, I didn't recognize the names because when I interviewed them, they didn't give me their real names. And I kept saying, I don't know those people. And they sat me down in my own living room and they're yelling at me, you're lying. And they're pointing their fingers in my face. And, they weren't fucking around. Right. And
right.
I kept saying, look, I don't know who these people are. And then eventually, as I talked to them, it came out, well, your name was in the address book of some people that we arrested for their graffiti on these restaurants. And then it dawned on me, oh my God, the same people that did the graffiti must be the same people that broke the animals out of the labs, right? So and then I said, well, listen, the only thing I can think of, I'm doing a story on vivisection, and I'm talking to a bunch of people that are against that and eating meat as well. And because I didn't want them to connect these people to the break-ins.
Right.
You know what I mean? I didn't
Yeah.
So I found all these ways to say that that must be them, but I never knew their names because, so anyway, but they almost took me away to jail. They demanded to search my place.
Oh,
And
wow.
I made a joke. I said, so what are you looking for? Monkeys with electrodes in their heads. And I was trying to lighten the mood. And the one guy, he was a big, stern, big guy, like, one of the big guys with the no neck type of, in a business suit. And he looked at me, he said, yes, that is what we're looking for.
Oh, no.
Oh my God. Of course they didn't find anything because I didn't have these animals, right? But that was pretty scary. So maybe you're right, Finn. Like, I try to push the boundaries in my fiction, just like I sort of push, because I always like controversial stories in the nonfiction as well, because I just found them, I just found them more important, I wrote a lot of what they call fluff stories as well, or just fun stories, right? Because that helps pay the bills too. But yeah, but I think some of my dark romance for a while got a little bit too dark because some of the readers just weren't having it.
Well, I think that, like you said, having the controversial conversations, like it really kind of it tests your humanity, and it tests, if you were in this situation, how would you respond, or what are your beliefs in this situation? And so it's definitely interesting that you're like testing people, testing your readers, and also probably testing yourself, like how far can I go with this? And you also have the knowledge, like Finn said, based off your investigation work, that how dark it can get, I imagine.
Oh yeah. The dark stuff, I'm not personally into the bondage stuff, but which is funny because a lot of my friends and relatives do, they know I write dark, right? But they don't know my pen name because I don't tell them, right? But
Right.
my aunt once said to me, are you into that stuff, dear? You know what I mean? Because she knows I write. I said, no, not personally, but a lot of people are. No, it's just fun to write, right? I don't think she quite believed me, but oh well, what can I do? Right? But
Right.
yeah.
She's gonna draw her own conclusions. You can't really
Yeah, like forever, probably, right?
She's gonna throw a rope, like in your funeral. She's gonna throw a rope on top of it. Like,
Yeah, or handcuffs, something, and yeah, it's fun. Well, see, in my books, the S&M wasn't play, like in a lot of the books, there's safe words and it's play stuff. In my books, it's for real, right? And I wrote this one series, and I had trigger warnings up the wazoo, like, and at one point I ended up saying something like, if you have any triggers at all, run for the hills, because and I said the main male character is not a nice guy, and I made it very clear he's very abusive. But my plan was for the series, their whole relationship was a train wreck, right? But my plan was by the end of the series, he turns into a nice guy and everything's resolved. But first, they go through this codependent, violent, hideous relationship. And it really wasn't a romance, though. It was, but it turned into a romance by the last book. But I sort of made that very, very clear in the blurb, but still people were just freaking out. Like, he actually hit her. And it wasn't a game. It's like, yeah, I made that clear in the blurb. Like sometimes you get irritated with the readers because they don't read the blurb and they don't read all the trigger warnings. And it can, it can be disappointing because you're thinking, wow, I took a long time to write that blurb just to make sure people knew what they were getting.
Yeah.
But it sort of goes back to the same thing. No matter what you do, you're not going to please all the readers, no matter what your genre, whatever. It's just not going to, you know what I mean? Not everybody is going to be happy with your stuff.
Now, was there any sort of like motivation behind that book? Like, were you trying to just portray something that you wanted to get out, or was there any sort of motivation behind that book at all?
At the time, I just had a book idea and it just came to me. I forget how it came to me. I just remember I suddenly got an idea and I thought, you know what, that would make a great book. But afterwards, years later, when I thought about it, because I'm a domestic violence survivor, right? So afterwards I thought about it and I thought, now, by the way, the character in that book was super hot, like sexy hot. Nothing like my ex-husband. I mean, I thought he was hot when I married him, but I was wrong. Yeah. So anyway, but I think what I was trying to do subconsciously was take this horrible train wreck of a relationship, this horribly abusive guy, and resolve it in the end. So, the female main character is all happy and they have this blissful life and, like a happily ever after, just because I think my relationship ended so bad, obviously, because he was very violent. But you know what I mean? I think part of my brain just wanted to resolve that because I mean you can't in real life. So I kind of resolved it in a fictional story. That's but at the time when I got the book idea, I wasn't even thinking about, well, if you hear a weird noise, my dog is dreaming and he's barking in his sleep. Do you hear that?
Yeah, he barks that is an aggressive sleep bark.
Okay, I wanna see when he's awake. Goodness gracious.
He's actually, he's okay, he's sleeping again, he's quiet. But yeah, so I think that's what I was trying to do, was sort of subconsciously resolve things that hadn't ever been properly resolved in my own life. But at the time it was just a book idea that worked, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder how many authors do that subconsciously, where they are trying to work through something and then they have their characters work through it without knowing that that's what they're doing. That is, I went through a similar situation where I wrote, I was in also a not great relationship, and I made the male character be this person that I felt like I needed in real life. And so he was this, this charming, very there for me kind of person. And then as I went back and read it years later, I was like, this is very cringy for me to read because it was so, you could just tell it was such a I was working through things when I was writing it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I get it. I totally get it. Yeah. But I bet you a lot. Sorry, Finn. What?
Well, I was gonna say they've established that's kind of how they're increasingly. There's more evidence on showing that methods like that work in therapy. I don't remember all the words. I read it. I made the mistake of reading it on an ebook, not a physical copy. But the Body Keeps Score talks a lot about therapy strategies where you essentially go back into a situation in your mind and you have it play out differently. Like what did you need to happen for you to move past that? So that's a well established like psychological way of dealing with stuff.
You know what? I think I read something about that once, or something similar about that you sort of go through it in your mind and make it play out a different way than it really played out, just to give yourself some closure, or at least to understand what you needed that you didn't get and all that stuff, right?
I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, that's definitely a thing. The same with Randie, what you're talking about. It's that, that idea of just like go back and what did you need? What does your inner child need, or inner whoever it is that you need to heal or needs healing? Like what does that person need at that time? So that's a well established like healing thing to do.
And I just love that it's so subconscious though.
Yeah, like I didn't realize it at the time, and neither did you. You just said it at the time. I thought I'm just writing this really great story, and it's years later when you look back, you think, oh, maybe this is the reason I wrote it this way. So in a way, I guess it's good to be an author because it saves a lot of money you would have spent on therapy.
Always.
Now, do you ever go back and reread your work that you've written in the past?
No. Do you?
Only because I'm rewriting that first book, just because it was so cringy.
How was it?
So yeah, that's what I'm going back and rewriting or rereading as I'm rewriting it. But I don't have a ton out there. I've got maybe 5 books total published right now. So I'm still rereading because I'm also working on the next book.
Oh, right.
Yep,
Yeah,
it's a
no,
fantasy series.
I try not to reread it because I just know if I do that, I'm gonna, because I've been an editor too for a living, right? I was an
Oh,
editor for, so then the editor in me, because the story's not fresh in my mind anymore, right? If I wrote it a long time ago, it's like reading somebody else's book in a way because, it's not so fresh in your mind. So I know the editor in me would go crazy. I'd be thinking, oh, I wouldn't have wrote that, or I would have, I would, in my head, I'd be wanting to correct stuff constantly. So that's why I stay away from it, because I know I won't be happy with it if I read stuff I wrote before. If I was going to rewrite it, I guess I would have to reread it, right?
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
interesting too. Like you used to not be able to rework books like you can now. Like I know, and I'm doing this personally, is where I'm pulling a book that I have published and I'm rewriting it and republishing it. And used to is like when you published it, that's what is out there. Like there's no pulling it.
not
oh, that's true. Yeah, right. Before, if it was out, it was out, and you couldn't change it. You would,
Yep. Like
well, are you
speaking of like
making a whole new story and just, or are you just sort of editing
Yeah, no,
that?
I am completely reworking it. It's going to have a very different feel. The very core plots are very similar, but starts out of a completely different situation. It's going to end completely different. But yeah, no, it was just I was so new and I was like, "Oh, this is great. I'm going to put it out there." And now I'm like I needed so much more experience before I
Oh
just
yeah.
Yep, been there.
Oh
Definitely
yeah,
there.
we've all been there. Like when I look back at my earlier works, even the nonfiction stuff that miraculously was published and paid for by some magazines. And um, when I look at my early stuff, both in fiction and the nonfiction, it's really crappy compared to what I wrote later because you just get better as you go, right?
Right.
And I think that's true for everybody, no matter what line of work they're in. It's not even just, if you're an author. I think with anything, you get better.
Absolutely.
But no, I've never thought of going back and rewriting it just because I don't know. I
if
just
it's
figure,
working for you, then I don't suggest it. I was not making sales, so I was like, okay, something here is not right. But if you're making
oh,
sales and you have people who love it, yeah, there's no reason to go back and redo it because then also you're gonna have readers who are like, I love that world. Why are you touching it?
oh, that's true too. Yeah, you don't want to screw with something that's doing well. It's the last thing you want to do is change anything. Yeah. The only thing I would do if I ever felt, the need, I would sort of look back on some stuff and say, you know what, I'll sort of take this basic scenario and now I'll change it and write it a different way. So basically, the main story idea might remain, and then I'd write a whole new book with a different title, a whole new plot, whole new characters. I think I could do that.
Yeah.
Um, but usually, unless if it's something I enjoyed writing a lot, the first time I might do it. But normally I'm too busy with the new stuff, right?
It's a good
Because right
problem to
now
have.
I've got way too much stuff on the go. I'm in the middle. I'm almost done the second book in my next trilogy. And then I've got sort of rough ideas written down for 3 more trilogies. So, you know what I mean? And I can hardly wait to get to my next one. And I haven't finished my current one. And I've got one out now, but the final book's not even out. But that book's tanking right now because I'm not advertising anymore because I was not making money with the only, 1 or 2 books out. You just don't get the sales. You end up spending way too much on ads.
Absolutely.
See, when I started, I believe Amazon gave you a little boost. You came out, you had a ranking right away. And I think when you were new, somehow, I don't know how the algorithm works with well, no one does. Everybody would love to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
But you used to get a little bit of a boost from them if you were new. Now I don't think they give anybody a boost. You're just like you don't even get a ranking unless you made
You're
at
just kind of
least,
throwing wolves.
yeah, you know what I mean? You're on your own. Yeah. So
So with moving forward and what is it that drives you to continue these stories and to continue putting work out there?
Well, it's really simple, just because I love to write. I mean, I find it fun, and it's rewarding to me, just writing the book. I mean, the sales and stuff, it's, I mean, that's great too, especially when you're making money. That's excellent, right? I mean, everybody wants to make money at whatever they're doing. But for me, the main reward is actually the fun of writing it, because I get so deep into the world as I'm writing, and I always put in different characters' points of view. So I really know my characters, and I get right into the world, as I'm writing. And that's so rewarding. But when the books are done, I don't ever go back and reread them, but they're still fresh in my mind when I finish a series. And that to me is the main reward. The rest is sort of just like a bonus. I mean, the money is a great. I don't mean that, but you know what I mean? It's not what keeps me writing. Because I mean, if all I wanted to do was make money, I could write a different way and follow the formulas more than I do, and the tropes more than I do. And I'd read a lot of what's selling, the top Amazon top 100. I'd pick, top 10, and just think, okay, I'll write something like that. And I could do it because that's sort of what I'm trained to do in nonfiction. And I could do it in fiction too. If all I wanted to do was make money, I know exactly what to write, because I see what's hitting top 100 on Amazon. You just have to write something exactly like that. I mean, everybody has their own voice and style, but you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
to me, it's not about making money, or that it just wouldn't, I don't know how to explain it. It just wouldn't be any fun. I wouldn't
So
enjoy
it's
it. It would feel
got the
like
life out of
work.
it.
I don't want it to ever feel like work.
Yeah. No, that makes 100% sense. And, there's a lot of people out there who they do take the pay cuts or they do that because it's their passion. And, if you're passionate about something, I feel like you never have to worry about, like you said, feeling like you are working to get a paycheck. And that's a hard way to live your life, is like, I work to pay bills. You also get to experience this beautiful world that you're creating, meet all these characters, and have an experience with your work.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've worked a lot in my life where I just worked for the paycheck. Like, as I said, when I wrote the nonfiction, sometimes editors would call me, that because I did a lot of freelancing, but sometimes an editor would call and say, "Hey, we'd really like a story on this um in upcoming edition of the magazine. Do you want to write that?" And sometimes I'd be thinking in my head, "Oh, hell no, I don't want to write that." I'd go, "Sure," because I knew I'm going to make this amount of money, because he's just given me the length of the story. And in my head, I was like a calculator, like, okay, I'm going to make this. And I'd go, "Oh, I'd love to. Oh, that's so interesting." But, I'm thinking, oh God, you know what I mean? So I've done that, and I've had a lot of regular jobs too, that were just interesting, but sometimes boring, right? So
Yeah.
we've
Absolutely.
all done that. But yeah, I don't want writing to ever feel like I'm just working for the paycheck.
That's fair. And that's such a good way to look at it too. Now, is your shifter series or your shifter writing, is it young adult? Is it adult? Is it what kind
This
of
one here, it's the Darkwood series. The first book out is Forbidden Wolf, and now I've got Cursed Wolf out, which aren't doing great now because I'm not advertising them, but they're young adult. Um, but the series I'm working on now, the series I'm working on now is young adult as well, but the next one I have planned isn't going to be young adult. So I'm going to do both. I think um certain ideas, I get a book idea, and I suppose it can work for young adult or just not, but um just in my head I think, oh, I have to make this young adult, because in my head it's the plot that's racing through my head, and I can write it best a certain way, whereas somebody else could take the same main idea and do it a total different way. But so I'm going to do both. I think just whatever mood I'm in, or I think whatever, it lends well to, you know. Sometimes I think some ideas will work a lot better for a young adult.
Yeah,
Just
and that's
Absolutely.
something that's something we've talked about too on the show is that, we could all three of us are authors and we could all get a very basic plot line and write it and it would look completely different as we finish, the finished product from mine to yours to Fenn's. And so I love that you're like, I could rewrite one of the books I've already written and it look like a completely different book if you keep the core plot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. That's very clever too. Because, well, if you think about it, you are literally creating a future market. If someone liked this book in your series, go read this. Because, like, when people finish, like, The Hunger Games, everyone's like, give me a book that's like The Hunger Games. I want to read a book that's like The Hunger Games. And you are
Oh, yeah,
literally
exactly.
creating that.
Yeah. The thing with I think, um, like for instance, the current book I have out, it's young adult, and there are some really hot, spicy scenes, but it's not filled with it. It's just where it's appropriate in the book, and I've got that in the blurb too, just so people know, so they don't have their 12-year-old trying to read this book, and then when they get to book 2, they're going, "Oh my god!" So,
Yeah. Closer to the
but-
adult side, not so much the
yeah,
young
yeah,
side.
yeah. So I always make that clear in the book. But for instance, it has no swearing whatsoever. It's a medieval world, although I'm sure they swore back then too. But you know what I mean? The current series has a lot of swearing, like everyone's saying "fuck this," and just, I mean, because they're all in their teens. Well, the main character, the male main character, is in his early 20s, but whatever. You know, they're all swearing, and because it's set in modern times. So my fear is sometimes I think someone's going to read the first thing. Well, there is a lot of some really spicy sex scenes, but then they're going to get to this next series and think, "Oh my God, look at this swearing!" And because that could be what they liked about me, that there wasn't swearing in the first. Because some readers are really against it. Like I've read some reviews for other authors where they'll get a 1 or 2 stars because of all the swearing, because some
Oh, I'm
readers just
screwed.
don't like that, right? So, you know, if at first I thought, I wonder if I should always keep a different, the same style, like, or whatever, or have no sex at all, because some people don't like the sex stuff, right? And then I thought, no, just write what you feel, and if you lose some of the readers, oh well, but you might gain some too that like, you know what I mean? It sort of boils down to, am I writing for myself or writing to try to please the world? And you can't please the whole world anyway. So,
Yeah, I think that goes right back to what you said earlier about the 1-star review. Like, you just kind of have to, it's a
oh, never
voice, but
forget it.
yeah, ignore it.
Yeah, my very first review ever. Like
Yeah.
that was
That is
devastating.
that blows my mind. That
Yeah,
person is on a mission. They're like, no other reviews. Perfect. This will be great.
yeah, it was like, I don't know. I've never, and I don't always review books I read, just if I feel really strongly. But honestly, maybe it's just me, but I've, you know, because I'm on KU and I can read as much as I want for $10, right? So I don't care what I download. If I don't like it, I don't finish it. I haven't really wasted my money, right? But honestly, I've read some books that, were a DNF, or I just read, sort of struggled through them and I didn't like them. But I just, maybe it's just me, but there's no way I'm going to write a shitty review. I'm just not going to review that.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
and
I,
that's how I feel too. Like, it's the same thing on like social media. Just scroll away. Like,
yeah,
especially if you
exactly.
didn't pay anything for it. And I can understand maybe if it was like you were expecting something completely different and then you got, if you feel like you got gypped, that maybe, but still, that I almost feel like that's an email to the author, like, hey, but
Yeah,
still,
no, but
I
I've
agree.
read
I
some
couldn't do it.
really nasty reviews, and I mean from some really great authors that are best-selling authors and everything. Every once in a while, you see some nasty person. I'm thinking, how could anybody be that angry over a book? It's a book. Let it go. You know what I mean? But there's people like that in all walks of life. Like you see it on Facebook. Somebody will put up an innocent post about something, and then everyone's attacking them. And it's like people are filled with such hatred that, I don't know, but reviewers can be really brutal. And I think authors just have to ignore it. Right? I mean, because why let it get to you? It's not going to help your writing. And they don't personally know you anyway. They're attacking some nameless, pen name, or some people write under their real, but they don't know you personally. So just don't let it get to you. They just didn't like your book. Well, big deal.
Not their cup of tea. So tell us this. I am very interested in hearing about the story where you ended up in bed with 2 tigers.
Oh yeah. It was platonic, just mention it because we were just talking about sex a minute ago. I don't want someone to think we're, transitioning to something weird here. But
Yeah, of course.
no, I was doing some volunteer work at a wildlife sanctuary, and I was hand raising 2 tiger cubs, and their enclosure that was being built for them wasn't quite done. So anyway, I kept them in my house, and of course they were hand raised, so they were very, friendly and stuff. So and then we had an enclosure for them that was temporary that they could go into, but it wasn't their main large one. So they were outside a lot, but I babied them too much because you get really attached when you hand raise something from 5 days of age. Like you honestly feel like you're their mummy. So I used to bring them in the house and they'd sleep in bed with me at night. And I'm telling you, I never, ever in my life felt so safe. I used to think if someone broke in here, would they ever be shocked?
About how old were they?
By the time they stopped sleeping in the bed with me, about 6 months old. So they weighed maybe, I'm trying to remember back, maybe 350, 400 pounds. Like they weren't full grown, but they weren't small by any means. Can you imagine a burglar or a rapist or something breaking into, well, I was on a farm, but still somebody breaking in, and they might expect a guard dog or something. Of course, there's no dog barking, right? So can you imagine somebody opening that door and seeing 2 pretty almost full grown, well, not quite full grown, but big by that point? Because
Yeah.
they weren't friendly with strangers. I mean, they're still wild animals. They just, they accept the people that they know, but they still act like tigers. It's not like they'll ever act like your house cat. But can you imagine the shock on a burglar's face or something? Like, yeah. So that was great. I really miss them when they finally left and went outside to their main enclosure. I didn't get to bring them home with me anymore. And you know what I mean? And yeah.
And so did that influence your writing at all? And I know you said that you have animals in a lot of your stuff that you write. I feel like that's a close connection for you in real life. So I imagine writing it feels good and you have a deeper connection with like explaining that kind of stuff.
I always throw in animals somewhere. And in my first series, the one that's out now, a raven plays a big part in the book. And this current series I'm writing right now that I'm working on, I have a raven in it as well. And of course, my name is Raven, my pen name. And I don't know why it just sort of worked out that way. But after I started, when I realized that, I thought, you know what, maybe that can be a brand sort of thing. And every
Absolutely.
series, I'll have a raven in some form playing an important part in the book. And a lot of people ask me, why'd you pick the name Raven Croft? I mean, it took me a while, but it just sounds good for what I'm writing for the shifter fantasy stuff. Plus, Raven is the name of one of my dogs. So you know what I mean? So
I
um
love that.
yeah, it wasn't anything real, special that made me pick it. It just dawned on me. I was playing with her one day and I thought, I'm going to use your name. I'm
I
going to
feel
steal
like
your name.
you I like how you keep saying I didn't really think about it, but then after time goes by, you're like, oh, that actually was from a deeper place. But
Yeah,
you are
yeah.
so much more intuitive than what you give yourself credit for.
Oh, really?
I think
I,
so.
I've actually been told that before a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like when you reflect on it, you're like, oh, actually, there is a deeper meaning behind that. But I didn't actually think about it. It just came because you're so intuitive. It's just something that's like a connection
Yeah,
without
because
you even realizing.
at the time I don't think about it, right? It's only after that you can see. But I mean, life in general is like that. It's only when you look back on your life that you see things clearly, that you think, why didn't I see that clearly then? It was so clear. But, as we're living life, it's harder. It's easier to look back on it and analyze it and see everything clearly. It's just like when you're giving a friend advice and they're telling you, I'm really struggling with this decision, whatever. Meanwhile, you're thinking the answer is clear. Like, what the hell are you struggling with? But you don't say it that way to your friend. Well, there are times when I've said that to my friends, like, what the
I
hell?
usually,
It's the same thing, right? You don't always see it at the time, right? So
Yeah, it's definitely hard to be present in the moment, but also think about the future and consider the past and not make mistakes that you repeated, but also where is this going? And being a human is insane.
no, yeah, it is. Well, I think it could be why I like to write about shifters. They're not even human. See, I think because in the worlds that I create, they don't have the confines of the humans and they can solve problems and it's a real escape, right? And I love animals, so of course shifters really make sense for me, right? Because but it's yeah, I think the great thing about fantasy in general is if you have problems in your, or even if you don't have problems in your life, like life is just life. It's not always easy, right? But the fantasy takes you into another world. I think that's why I love the fantasy so much.
Yeah, that's fair. Now with your shifter, is it mainly like the same animal that they shift into, or do you have different species shifters?
Well, this series that's out now, well, mainly out, the third book is coming out in about 2 weeks, I guess. I'd have to look up the date. They're shifting into Wolven, but there's also other types of vampire-ish types of shifters, and there's demons and there's witches. So there's a lot going on. This trilogy I'm working on now, they're Wolven too, but in a different way. Like their culture is different and whatever. But there's also other creatures as well. Because I like to throw in a whole bunch of different types of shifters and different creatures. I think it's just whatever I feel fits with the book, and it suddenly comes to me as I'm writing it. Because, like I said, I don't pre-plan anything. I just wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I definitely feel like you have an intuition though that even though you're not pre-planning, it all just comes together really nicely in the end.
Well, what's weird? I write myself into a corner all the time. I mean, big time, like constantly. And I think, what the hell am I gonna like? Sometimes, it's so bad. I think I've got to end this book. Like I can't finish writing this series because there's no way I can get out of this and make it be believable. Like, and then all of a sudden I'll wait a day or two and the answer comes to me and it's totally believable. But I find that fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But see,
Mhm.
if I was pre-planning it, I wouldn't have that same type, I wouldn't have as good plot twists or whatever, because normally I think when people, pre-plan their work, they sit and they do it over a span of maybe 1 day, 2 day, three, whatever. But, if they don't know the characters well enough to add the twists or the world well enough, but if you're doing it as you're writing, I don't know. It's just, to me, there's just the world is richer, and you can come up with this way to get yourself out of the corner you've just written yourself into. If you're just at the planning stage, I don't think you know the book or the character. You don't know it well enough, and I don't think you wouldn't write yourself into a corner if you were pre-planning everything. So to me, anyway, it makes for a much less interesting book.
That's
Because you're
really
careful
good.
not to do that when you're pre-planning, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you naturally, I feel like naturally we try to make things as easy on ourselves as possible. And so like I feel like if you were to pre-plan it, you would try to make the plot make as much sense as possible as you're writing it. But yeah, I mean, and I've experienced this personally is like how do you come up with the plot twist? What can I do ahead of time that is this crazy thing that no one saw coming? And I have found that I am so much better at doing that when I have no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. If I had to think of it ahead of time, I would have real trouble trying to think of plot twists. And I
Those are
think just
usually the.
because what?
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry, yeah, no,
Oh,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because if you're pre-planning it, your creative juices aren't flowing as much, or however you want to word it. For me, anyway, I can't pre-plan. So there's no way I could put in a plot twist that's any, great shakes or anything. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I'm a huge planner.
Are
And
you?
what it usually is, I am huge planner. I have literally Save the Cat writes a novel on my shelf as we speak. And I usually what I usually end up doing is I have the plot twist ahead of time, and then I'm like, okay, how do I form a novel around these particular incidents that I want to write? And those usually come first.
Oh, you mean you sort of think of these scenes, sort of, or parts of the
right.
plot,
Just
plot
like, yeah, I
twist
want to do
first?
yeah,
Oh,
I want to put these characters in this super stressful situation. And then it's a matter of, okay, let's backtrack and see how I get that. How do I put them in this situation?
oh, wow.
Um, that's how it
Interesting,
Seems like
Finn. Oh,
fun.
that is good.
That actually sounds like fun. I never really thought of doing it that way. See, to me, when I picture planning a book, I picture sitting there thinking, okay, where will chapter one starts? And then I get bored because I don't know enough about, you know what I mean? But Finn's way sounds like amazing.
That's at least that's I mean it's worked for me thus far, and that way I can kind of skip. I don't at least I haven't I found that I don't really write myself into a corner as well, because I can just skip. If I know what that beat is gonna be, like if it's chapter one, like I might not know what that image is gonna be, but I know what the rising tension looks like. I know what the end of act one looks like. I can plan all of those and start drafting that, and then when I finally get my opening image, I can go back. And
Oh,
at least that's how it's worked out for me thus far. We'll see if it keeps working.
That's awesome. I love that there are two completely different styles here. That is great for anyone who's like, no, I do this and then I do this. Hey, guess what? It works both ways.
yeah, the
You can
way,
have
as long as it works, do it.
yeah, exactly.
Yep. So what do you do? What do you read? Like, is there when you are taking a break from writing and taking a break from that, what is it that you go to that you enjoy reading the most?
Usually nonfiction lately. Because I find when I'm reading fiction, I can't help but analyze it somehow. I think it's the editor in me, because I was an editor for a number of years. And when I'm reading someone's fiction book, regardless of the genre, I can't help but, in my head, I'm thinking, oh, I would have written this a different way. Or I don't mean
Oh,
criticize, because a lot
absolutely.
of the books I read, I love, and I'm thinking, this is great. Oh, I should write like this or whatever. But to me, it's not taking a break, because I'm always thinking like a writer as I'm reading. So to me, it's just not a break anymore. So I don't read fiction anymore, hardly ever. I read just nonfiction, whatever I feel like, I'm interested in at the time. Because I find it totally gives me a break from the fiction world. And I'm always
Mhm.
afraid when I used to read a lot of fiction that I'd accidentally, steal part of someone's plot, or one of the characters would, be in the back of my head, and I'd accidentally make one of my characters too much like a character in another book. Not even on purpose, but it's all there in your head once you've read a lot. So, um, and I mean, it's never happened, but I always had this fear that I'd be influenced by something I read, and I'd sort of turn into somebody I wasn't when I was writing.
So what are you
So
reading right now? What is something that you or have read recently in fiction or nonfiction? No, I'm sorry,
nonfiction.
fiction.
Um, well, this isn't right now at the moment. I'm not reading anything because I just don't have time. I've got so much on
That's
the
fair.
go, because I'm trying to, because I have, like, I bought myself a forest, right? So I have room for horses, but I've got some acreage here, and it's mostly forest with hiking trails and stuff. So I want to turn this into a nature treat, a retreat with some captive wild, like a sanctuary and a writing retreat and stuff. So I've been doing a lot of planning and stuff for that. But one of the so I haven't had a lot of time to read in quite a while, but one of the best books I wrote, it's actually nonfiction. It was about animal afterlife. And there's lots of books on Amazon. If you Google, I mean, if you do a search on Amazon, most of them are just filled with anecdotes about people talking about, my dog died, and then I saw this flower growing in a strange place, and I knew it was. but there's no proof. You know what I mean? It's just, but anyway, I read this one book. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I think it's actually called something about evidence or evidence for animal afterlife or something like that. But and I read it. I think not too long after my little Chihuahua passed away. He was almost 24 years old. But so I just, I still have a hard time with it, right? I miss him. But see, I've had a lot of experiences with animal afterlife, like since I was just a little kid. But I mean, like real shit that can't be explained any other way, not just a rainbow in the sky suddenly appearing. Oh, it's a sign for, no, I mean, real, So, but after his name was Chico, after he passed, even though I've had so much experience, personal experience with it, I just wanted more proof, because you just can't bear the thought of them being. So I looked on Amazon and I found a book that seemed to be based on real evidence and stuff. I think the author, I'm trying to remember what he had said in the book, and I read in his bio. I think he's a researcher or a psychologist or something. So he's not like, in that case, just, it wasn't a case of just wishful thinking type of stuff, right? So you could take his word for it. So I read that. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff I like to read when I'm not writing. I want to get totally away from the fiction world and just, read something else.
That's fair.
I probably don't read as much as I should, because I like on Facebook, I see other authors and they're always reading. Oh, the book I'm currently reading I'm thinking, how do you have time to read? Like maybe it's
everyone's
just
style it's their style, and what works for them, it works for them, and it might not work for everybody else.
Yeah. I wish I did have more time to read, but there's only so many hours in the day.
Absolutely.
And
now, this next book that you have coming out, you said it's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks, correct?
yeah, it's book 3 of the Darkwood series. Because there's Forbidden Wolf, Cursed Wolf, and the book that's going to be coming out soon is Fated Wolf. It's just the last book in the trilogy.
Gotcha. So, excuse me. If anyone was interested in finding the first 2 books or, kind of following you to look for this next book, where would they go and how would they kind of connect with you on that?
Well, the books are on Amazon. If they just do a search for Raven Croft, then the books will come up. Or just type in, the name of the first book. I think there's other books that may have the same name. I don't know, because that happens a lot, right? But if they just type in Forbidden Wolf Raven Croft, then they'll find mine and they'll find the first 2.
Now, are you on social media that anyone can follow anywhere?
I did have Facebook, but then I found it was taking up so much of my time that I just got rid of my author page for now, because I thought, until I get this huge following, I'm just spending too much time on Facebook and not enough time, promoting and writing, because it's so much work. So right now I don't have an author page on Facebook. I did for a while, but I just found it was just taking up a massive amount of my time.
That's fair. And it's hard. And it is so hard to juggle everything. So, whatever you got to do that makes it work for you. Clearly you've done it before and built it up. So you're doing it again. You just different genre
No,
this
I
time.
don't even have an author page under my other pen name, believe it or not. I
That's
never
amazing.
bothered. I just well, I mean, everybody's life is different. They have so much different shit on the go, and it just for me, the social media right now just doesn't fit in well unless I want to be up till 4 a.m. trying to get everything done that I have to get done. So, but I
Calling
mean,
me out
eventually
now, Raven.
I should do a web page too. I mean, eventually, like a website for my for both my author names, really, right? But pen names, I mean, but I haven't yet.
Awesome. Well, you have been amazing. This has been such a fun episode, and I am excited. I honestly, I want to go and read some of your stuff because the way that you talk about your intuition and the way you get through your things, that alone is very intriguing to me, and I'm very interested to see how you do that. So I will be going and checking out some of your work.
Oh wow, thank you.
All
Well, I
right,
hope
guys.
you like it too.
Yeah. I will let you know, and I will message you. I will put it on my TBR because, that thing is never getting smaller.
Yeah, right. No, it only gets larger and larger because I've got that too.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Lemon's Listening Library, and we hope you guys stick around for the next episode. Have a good one.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening.